The safety of the pilot and the life of the aeroplane depend on the reliability of the airframe and its engine. Freedom from breakdown can only be obtained by frequent and regular inspection. Efficient maintenance depends not only on the skill and diligence of the airmen, but on the interest and supervision shown by the officers and NCOs. So that the work may be done efficiently and quickly, a maintenance schedule has been prepared for each type of aeroplane. It describes the maintenance routine which is normally required. If anything needs attention that is not covered by the schedule, then it does not mean that the work may be neglected or postponed. This is so important that I shall read the actual Air Ministry instructions. The schedule is not to be interpreted as absolving any persons concerned from the responsibility of acquainting themselves with or acting upon any circumstances indicating the necessity for additional work. The schedule defines what is to be inspected more frequently than others. In this film, the daily inspection only is described. There are other inspections which must be made between flights, after every 30 hours, 60 hours, and 240 hours. For the purpose of reference, the aeroplane is divided into a number of assembly groups, each distinguished by reference letters, such as UC for undercarriage and PP for power plant. These groups are subdivided, each subdivision being given a number which denotes a specific operation. An aeroplane maintenance form is provided for each aeroplane. This is kept in the flight office. It is known as Form 700. On the inside covers are directions for use. The daily inspection certificate is printed inside. This certificate shows that the daily inspections have been duly completed. It is initialed by the flight rigger, flight mechanic, instrument repairer, wireless operator, electrician, and armorer. The flight NCO countersigns it, signifying that he is satisfied that all the inspections have been properly carried out. It is also countersigned by the pilot before the aeroplane leaves the ground. The middle page contains the change of serviceability and repair log, a record of all repairs, modifications, and replacements. The periodical inspection certificate refers to the 30-hour, 60-hour, and so on inspections. The aeroplane is taxiing in. You will note that the flight mechanic and flight rigger are going out to meet it. Owing to the pilot's restricted forward view when taxiing, on approaching the aprons round the hangars, these two members of the crew always assist the pilot by placing themselves at each wingtip and guiding him in the direction they want him to go. Refueling is always carried out immediately an aeroplane lands and before it is wheeled into the hangar. One reason for refueling immediately is that condensation in the petrol tanks is prevented. Any water in the petrol system might obviously be the cause of a serious accident. On no account may aeroplanes be refueled inside the hangar because of the danger of fire. The aeroplane's crew take charge and wheel it into the hangar. It is still considered serviceable and will remain so until 24 hours have elapsed since the last daily inspection. A between-flight inspection is carried out after every flight, the details of which are not entered on the maintenance form. flight mechanic is now seeing how much oil is in the oil tank. The oil level is determined by the position of the filler cap, which is so placed that it automatically provides sufficient airspace above it to allow for oil pumped out of the engine by the scavenge pump and for the expansion and frothing of the oil at high temperatures. And the flight mechanic fills up to the level of the cap. Normally, the undersurfaces of the main plane, the wheel recesses, and the oleo legs are cleaned each day with a clean rag to remove grit or mud which handicap the retraction of the undercarriage. Mud splashed up by the wheels is more difficult to remove after it is dry. Oil is easier to remove while the engine is still warm. Petrol must never be used for cleaning purposes. This film is intended to show how a typical daily inspection is carried out. In some units, it is more convenient to carry out the inspection in the evening. In others, part of the work is done in the evening and the remainder completed the following morning. In this squadron, the daily inspection is carried out in the early morning. Provided that inspection is carried out every 24 hours, latitude is allowed to units as to the time of the day at which the inspection may be carried out. A night bombing squadron will probably adopt a different routine from that of an Army cooperation squadron, in which the conditions are different. In this film, it's been necessary to show the flight mechanic, flight rigger, wireless operator, electrician, instrument repairer, and armourer carrying out their inspections separately. Normally, of course, they would all work at the same time. In an actual inspection, the airmen go round in an anti-clockwise direction, examining, as necessary, each part as it is arrived at. For the sake of clearness, this procedure has not been adopted in the film. Instead, the inspection in each case, such as UC or undercarriage, is completed before another group is started on. The time taken for a daily inspection will vary with the type of aeroplane and engine, but it shouldn't normally take more than 1 hour. Schedules are only issued for guidance, and the CO of a unit may adopt them as they stand, or amend them or modify them to suit peculiar local conditions. The commanding officer takes care to avoid including items for inspection which are not essential to the proper maintenance of the aeroplane, because the inclusion of too many items may lead to attention being diverted from vital inspections to those of little or no importance. We start off with the rigger's inspection. He first of all looks at the change of serviceability and repair log in Form 700 to see that nothing has been put unserviceable. Then he positions himself well in front of the aeroplane so that he can get a rapid general view of it. Thus he gets an immediate impression of the trim. A tire down, low pressure in one of the oleo legs, or other faults will be noticed at once. Now he is going in to start on the first group, the undercarriage. He inspects this for damage and then gets under the wing to look up at the retracting gear, which also he assures himself is undamaged. There is often a good deal of mud, especially on wet days, owing to the wheels being drawn up into the recesses, leaving some of the mud they've picked up behind when they're lowered again on landing. So the rigger gets busy with a rag and carefully cleans the joints, pivots and fairings, and re-greases as necessary. The undercarriage, when raised or lowered, is locked into place by means of pins controlled by cables, and it is the rigger's next job to see that these cables are not slack. The oleo leg comes next. the pressures should be normal. He can check whether this is so or not by noting the sliding portion, this, is exposed for not less than 3 1/4 inches. If there has been excessive oil leakage, the sliding portion would show signs of this in the form of streaks of oil, and of course the leg would be low. The sliding portion is kept greased, and grease may pick up grit, so the next thing he does is to clean the old grease away and apply fresh. He then lubricates the glands through the nipples, 2 turns of the grease gun handle per nipple. He now turns his attention to the tires and tests them for pressure, using a pressure gauge. Now the outside of the tires for damage. This is a very important part of the inspection, as at the high speed at which the Spitfire lands, a weak tire may be the cause of a serious accident. That finishes the rigger's undercarriage inspection. The next part of the aeroplane to be done is the cockpit. He is examining the gauge which registers the pressure in the air containers. This must be at least 270 pounds per square inch. If it drops below 250 pounds, the guns won't fire effectively. Now he is trying the brake lever. The action of the rudder bar not only moves the rudder, but actuates the wheel brakes for control when taxiing. Thus, a turn to starboard applies the brake on the right-hand wheel, and a turn to port, the brake on the left-hand wheel. He is testing the rudder movement and seeing that it gives sufficient pressure in either brake. The pointers on the air pressure gauge refer to the brakes on the wheels. Port, starboard. When both brakes are on, the pressure of each should be equal, as you see here. He leaves the parking brake on. Thus he keeps the aeroplane still for the rest of the inspection. He will check the pressure gauge when he has finished his inspection to see that the air pressure has been properly maintained in the system. That is to say, if the gauge drops back, it'll show him there's a leak somewhere, calling for further investigation. Now he operates the control column and makes sure that the elevator has a full and free movement, and the same with the ailerons. Then he operates the rudder bar and sees that it gives free and full movement of the rudder. Note these tabs on the elevator and rudder. They are the trimming tabs. Their position is controlled by these 2 wheels. This one controls the elevator tab, which gives the aeroplane nose trim. In order that the rigger can watch its movement from the cockpit, he lifts the elevator, which brings the tab into his view. He now operates the control and sees that it has full and free movement. Likewise, the rudder trimming tab. He operates the rudder bar until he can see the tab clearly, and then tests out the control for full and free movement, in both cases seeing that the play is not excessive. He now checks up the nose trim indicator and sees that it agrees with the position of the elevator tab control. He operates the landing flaps. The undercarriage is normally lowered by the operation of a hydraulic system. But should this, for any reason, be out of action, there is an emergency system controlled by this lever, which is sealed up. The rigger must see that the wire sealing the emergency system is intact. For if it had been used, it means that the hydraulic system has failed and will have to be dismantled, cleaned, inspected, and refilled. While still in the cockpit, he inspects the safety harness attachments for security. He pulls the harness shoulder straps and sees that the release gear works properly. He next examines the hood and windscreen and sees that they are clean and free from cracks. Then he seats himself in the cockpit and draws the hood over to see that it moves freely. He is now seeing that the latch in the closed position holds and can be released. Sliding the hood open again, he tests the latch in the open position in the same way. That finishes his inspection so far as the cockpit is concerned, and he now turns his attention to the fuselage, which he inspects for dents and cracks, particularly on the underside. This brings him to the tail unit, and he examines the surfaces of the fin and tailplane for damage. Then the fabric coverings of the rudder, elevators, and trimming tabs for damage and loose stringing. The rudder and the elevator hinges must be kept lubricated, and he gives one turn of the grease gun handle for each nipple. He ends his inspection of the tail unit group at the tail wheel. He inspects the caster unit and sees that the main spindle is not broken. He sees that the tail wheel tire pressure is normal and examines the tire for cuts and damage. Finally, lubricating the hub bearings with antifreeze grease. 2 turns of the grease gun handle. Now he goes to the main plane and inspects its skin for dents, cracks, or loose rivets, which will be detected by cracks in the paint. Then he cleans out the wheel recesses, which are apt to get mud in them from the retracted wheels. He examines the wing flaps for damage and distortion. Then the aileron fabric coverings for damage. The rigger has nearly finished now. He sees that all cowling, panels, and inspection doors are securely fastened and gives a final look round to see that he hasn't left any rags about. You remember that at the beginning of his inspection, he left the parking brake on so that he could check the system for leakage. Now he has another look at the pressure gauge and finds the system in order. The rigger has now completed his part of the daily inspection. All that remains to do is to complete and sign the maintenance form.